Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. Welcome back to Teaser Season for patch 0.5.0. Today is day 13. Today we're talking about one of the most important topics, even if it doesn't necessarily seem it, and that is Fate of the Vaal as a core Path of Exile 2 mechanic. I must admit that I was very, very concerned when they said that they were bringing the temple back after the impact that it had in Path of Exile 2's 0.4.0 expansion. Let's just have a look at the inflation that it caused. So we're going to look at the prices that lineage gems were trading at late in 0.4.0. Uhtred's Augury, 1,300 Divine Orbs. Garakan's Resolve, 748 Divine Orbs. Ulnatol's Embrace, 663 Divine Orbs. And you also saw this when you started looking at things like fragments. So we take a look in at the fragment prices here. You have the ridiculous stuff like here you've got the Trialmaster's Reliquary Key, 3,400 Divines. But I want to look instead at the Calamity fragments and the Deadly Fate, Cowardly Fate, Victorious Fate. These are things that tend to get traded quite a bit. So tertiary Calamity fragments were trading at 54 Divines towards the end of the league. Primary and secondary ones around 20. So an attempt at Uber Arbiter was costing you just under 100 Divine Orbs. And that wasn't the limit of where it went to. If we have a look at the Trialmaster, you had Deadly Fate, Cowardly Fate, Victorious Fate. This trio cost you a total of 120 Divines, a little bit more than 120 actually, closing in on 130. And these have fallen. If you have a look a few days ago, they were actually higher than this. What's gone on here is not that there's tremendously high demand for these particular boss encounters. There is demand for them. But what's really going on here is that in 0.4.0, Divine Orbs pretty much weren't loot anymore. Divine Orbs were just trash on the ground because there were so many of them dropping. It's not that they were completely down to zero value, but they were the closest to zero value that they've ever been across both Path of Exile games. At the same time, if we have a look at some of the Drop Anywhere uniques, so don't pay attention to Gnashing Sash and Bursting Decay. They come from specific bosses, so they're not that important here. Instead, I want you to take a look at things that are Drop Anywhere, really iconic uniques. Headhunter, 8 Divines. Original Sin, 8 Divines. Astromentus, 7 Divines. All of these are among the cheapest prices that you would ever expect them to be, and that's because the 0.4.0 mechanics that were disgorging a lot of Divine Orbs were also disgorging so many of these items that, again, they kind of cease to be loot in any meaningful sense. It's not that every individual that wanted these items had them, it's that every individual that had anything really at all to trade for them, they definitely had them. So that was the consequences of the way that it was implemented originally. What are Grinding Gear Games doing to change it? Well, that's what we're going to see here. So, with Return of the Ancients launching on May 29th, if you're in the United States, May 30 for me in Australia, you may be wondering what will happen to the Fate of the Vaal leagues and your existing characters. So this document actually starts by looking at the transferring from one league to another. So Fate of the Vaal leagues end a few days early. So this is going to be approximately 96 hours before the new league starts. Actually, I think it's 94 hours before the league starts. So for me, 8 a.m. 26th of May, but for you, it's probably a different time zone. And if it really matters to you to get that exactly right, then jump over to the Grinding Gear Games website, link in the description below, and you'll be able to find that. Now, the characters that you've built in that league, they will be available to continue playing if you want in the permanent league that it's parented to. So if you've elected to play with the solo self-found rule set turned on and the hardcore rule set turned off, then your characters from Fate of the Vaal, they'll be migrated to the early access perpetual solo self-found environment, and they'll be able to be continued to be played there. No wipes, so once the migration completes, you can just keep playing them. There's usually several hours of downtime during this period, or several hours at most, and I typically advise, if you do care about the characters that are being transferred, watch and wait on the Path of Exile 2 subreddit, make sure that it's gone without any hitches, because every now and again there has been a hitch. It's just a massive, massive amount of data that they have to migrate from one place to another, and that is something that computers tend to have a couple of little mistakes when they do. Anyways, the thing that will matter for more people, because playing in the Perpetual Leagues isn't the most popular way to play the game, playing in Leagues is, Atziri's Temple is staying in Path of Exile 2 as a core mechanic. We'll cover the changes in a bit more detail in the full patch notes, and these are coming out 8 days before launch, but here are the main things you need to know. Firstly, in Act 3, there will be Vaal Beacons. If you activate 6 of these by finishing encounters, so killing all the monsters that guard them, that will unlock the temple in the present day. So this is the same as just doing it in the Fate of the Vaal expansion and doing it in Act 3. You'll be able to access it there, but you won't be able to access it in Acts 1 and 2. If you complete more beacon encounters in specifically the Doriani's Contingency interlude, you will also gain access to the temple in the past. So it looks like Doriani's Contingency, that interlude is getting the temple, Act 3 is getting the temple, but it is not going to be in Acts 1, 2, 4, or the other 2 interludes. Once you reach the endgame, you can encounter Vaal beacons in maps. The level of the temple will be based upon the area level where crystals were collected. This is a big change. In the actual Fate of the Vaal League, it was based upon your character's levels, so keep that in mind. So if you want to open high-tier temples, you will need to run high-tier maps. There's also going to be a new region on the Atlas that has guaranteed Vaal beacon encounters in every single map. Completing this area will give you points for the Temple Atlas tree, and this will have many new bonuses for the temple itself. And you can see here, having a look at this graphic that they've got, that there's a statue of Atziri here, there's a bunch of maps that just have a bit of a Vaal feel. Chances are that some of these will have layouts that are thematically associated with the Vaal in some way, which generally tend to be among the worst layouts in the game. So you want to keep that one in mind, but it's probably still going to be worth punching through this, especially if you're interested in getting back into doing temple runs. There are also going to be temple precursor tablets that will guarantee Vaal beacons in your map if you want to focus on this content. Now, something else to be said about precursor tablets. Something I think a lot of people missed in the Day 5 announcement was that the temple precursor tablets, and all of the precursor tablets for that matter, when you put 3 of them into a map, this actually blocks other mechanics. So you can put 3 temple precursor tablets onto a map, and we'll have to find out what the benefit for stacking 3 of the same one is, because if they work the way that they did in 040, there wouldn't be a benefit for doing it, but I believe there will be a benefit for it in 050. And if you do that, then it blocks all of the other possible league mechanics. So this means you're guaranteed not to get a breach. This means you're guaranteed not to have a Mirror of Delirium, but in exchange for that, you will get a juicier temple encounter than you would otherwise get. And full details of that will be something we'll have to discover. I do feel like a lot of the time, tripling down on the same mechanic may end up being the best way once you are established at endgame, but we'll have to just test that one out in practice. Now, here we have snek getting trod on, and snek is definitely getting trod on here. This is the end for the current snake strategies. However, I wouldn't be surprised if there are new problems, and I very much hope that Grinding Games are on top of solving any new problems that come up as a result of new strategies that get found that completely and utterly break the league economy. So, in order to prevent the snek strategy, rooms that are meant to be destabilized but that cannot be removed without disconnecting parts of the temple, these will be downgraded to paths instead. This applies no matter what form the destabilization takes. This will apply whether you use a device in a selected tier 3 room, whether you open the vault, or whether it's general destabilization upon closing the temple. So what this means is that the intention is that temples typically have 60 rooms total. Now, this is in a situation where a tier 3 room is going to count as 3 of those. That's the stable intention. Sometimes you will get higher than that, sometimes you'll get lower than that. Now, of course, you're going to start with a lot less than that, but you will be able to build up to those. And that's the thing that's really changing there. That's the really substantial transformation that's going to be going on. Also, rooms can now be built up to tier 4. You don't have this ability to start with. This is something you have to unlock on the Temple Atlas tree, and it'll allow you to specialize more into particular room types if you want to do so. I think one of the things they're going for here is a situation where people who are engaging with the temple gameplay, they're doing different things to each other. I think that's Grinding Games' goal. After that, reward rooms that are granted from the console on defeating the Architect have been significantly improved, with more varieties to unlock, in addition to upgrading the rewards of all of the existing one. I think they noticed that even people who were not building snake temples were not really paying much attention to the Architect. There were some things that were kind of okay there, but they weren't extraordinary, and ultimately people just weren't that excited by it. Vaal Infusers were a single currency item that used to work on any armor and any weapon. We're changing these into 4 distinct currency items. These are now going to work on armors, martial weapons, caster weapons, and jewelry, allowing you to use them with catalysts as well. Existing Vaal Infusers will become Vaal Armorers Infusers and will only apply to armor. Now, I do think something here is very important. You're going to be able to overquality jewelry here. This is going to take away a little bit from some of the narrow things that Breach is best at currently. However, at the same time, Breach is becoming the best at certain other things as well. That's because Breach rings, their current quality bonus is that they can exceed 20 quality. And so the ability to get 30% quality on jewelry is something that takes a little bit away from that. But that power is coming back to Breach. It's not like Breach is losing that entirely. Breach is picking up new things. Now, the meta progression of this mechanic is getting sped up, really sped up. All players will now start with a maximum crystal cap of 60 and a medallion cap of 6. So you don't need to do all of those upgrades in order to get that. Instead, all of that progression is skipped, and you can start getting optimized temples and optimized temple quality of life, really, as early as possible. Medallion drop rates. This is an interesting change, and I think it makes a lot of sense. They have been improved on smaller temples, so that'll help you get your temple established a bit faster, but they've also been slightly reduced at larger temple sizes. So if you do start getting a temple really well established, then you're no longer going to snowball ahead quite as much. Oh, and as for your existing temples, they're going to be migrated to standard early access leagues. You will not be able to play with them until the expansion goes live, and of course, if they're snek temples, snek is going to get trod on as soon as you actually run a temple after that, because it's then going to destabilize a lot of the nodes, and you're going to end up with a temple that's probably still very strong for a little while, but it is going to be brought back into line over time. There's a few interesting Temple Atlas passive tree nodes here. Now, the first one, Efficient Arteries, encourages a particularly weird style of building. 20% increased effect of room temple modifiers, but only applying to rooms that have 4 adjacent rooms. So this is probably on the weaker end, because I think unless you stay right near the south end of the temple and you just sort of build as many rooms as you can there, you might be able to make this work reasonably well if you do that. But this is not something that's explosively powerful realistically wherever you are. It's going to be difficult to get good value out of this, especially given that it's only 20%. I think it's something you're happy to have, but it's probably only going to be 20% bonus to maybe 4 or 5 rooms at most. And as a result, I don't think this is a great node. Atziri's assets. Atziri's vault will contain an additional reward. Now, the first one of these is a Vaal unique item, but the second choice and the third choice, Carnegie Games decided they might want to be a little bit quiet about that one. So we're going to have to find that one out once we actually get to unlock this in-game, which realistically will probably get sold by a player in Early Access Standard at some point pretty quickly after launch. And then we have Transcendent Progress. This is the most transformative. Temple rooms may now be upgraded to Tier 4. This is something that is going to transform everything that you can do with the temple. And what I'm hoping is that we see this mechanic in a much healthier state than it was in 040, where it's no longer causing this sort of level of inflation where divine orbs aren't really loot. So the things that genuinely are loot, the things that people really do want, end up exploding to prices that have never been seen before. Instead, hopefully we end up seeing a mechanic that ends up being fun and that doesn't break the game open. And they finish off by saying, thanks for playing in Fate of the Vaal. We hope you enjoy the upcoming league and all of the new content. Anyways, that's the changes that are coming to the Fate of the Vaal content. I am quietly optimistic about this, although I'm still very nervous, because the temple was something that really did kind of ruin 040 in my mind. And 040 was a league that I bounced off pretty decisively when it became clear that just killing regular monsters didn't feel rewarding anywhere in the game. The only place that killing monsters felt rewarding was either in a juiced temple, or alternately, if you were killing monsters that had drops that you can't get anywhere else, such as some of these lineage gems. And ultimately, that was what caused me to lose interest in the league. Hopefully, that is not the case this league. Hopefully, we end up in a situation where killing base game monsters still feels like it's got some rewards. And when you do get that lucky perfect Chaos Orb or that perfect Exalted Orb, it's no longer, oh, okay, yeah, well, that's still on my loot filter. I guess I'll go pick it up. Instead, it's like, oh, cool, that's a really good drop. And that's what I'm hoping we see now. I'm going to leave it there. May your Vaal Orbs have interesting results.